Morning.
Morning, how are you?
Hi.
Fine, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. So how's your week been?
Just hit the wrong button. It's been a busy week. We've had our year sixes in for their final week, so they've all finished now, which has been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions as they normally go. So it's been a busy week in that respect. How about you?
I've still got my bubble for another 2 weeks. We're now stable at 11, but it has been that, it's dealing with those emotions. I'm so pleased we're discussing transition today, because actually they have so many emotions going on about what's coming up, where they are at the moment, and the fact that actually they're not with the children that they have been with the last number of years. Suddenly they're with a fewer number of children. They don't get to have that sort of leaving celebrations that they've always had. And that really has impacted on them emotionally, and it's how best we support them in transitioning out of where they are into where they are next.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about having this conversation. What about you, Emma? How's your week been?
Oh, crazy. Did New Ed last weekend, obviously. So I came down on the but I've been kind of in my own little bubble at home, because all 3 children of mine are at home constantly. So I'm trying to manage transition for them, because my youngest is due to start in September. And then I've got one moving from year 1 to year 2, and then the other one moving from year 4 to year 5. But also I'm managing another kind of transition, because I'm dealing with the transition day from our skit to our NQT course. So I'm actually kind of managing transition for trainee teachers into the profession. So I'm kind of managing from home to school transition, and then from training to professional transition. So all from this room. So crazy. Yeah, but all good.
So,
Yeah, it is such a strange time for everyone with all the transitions, because we've also got in school, I'm transitioning my year 4s into year 5, and my year 3s into year 5 is my new class. So I'm really excited that we've got Liz and Sue on today, who are transitioning next week.
Here's Liz.
There's
Hi,
Liz.
Liz.
Good morning.
Good morning.
They are, and I'm hoping to learn loads from you. Really, no pressure, ladies. But you're basically going to sort my life out. And
Over to you, Sue.
It's a really important topic, more than it has ever been, hasn't it, for class of 2020? It really is a really important topic, and lots of people are quite anxious about it. So here, if we can give some sort of reassurance, if nothing else, then we've done a good job.
Absolutely. So tell us, Sue, what do you do with regards to transition? Why are you on here today?
Well, I have written a programme with the wonderful Jo Fitzgerald. I'm a former deputy head and class teacher for over 25 years. Jo is the same. She trains in mental health awareness for young people, and she does all sorts of wonderful things. And we came together because we met and we write books around parenting and children. And we talked about working together, because I just really respect her and I really love her energy and what she says. And we thought about how can we best help families. And she said, well, I think transitions are really important, whether they are starting school or going from primary to secondary, or going from school to sixth form or sixth form to university. Life is full of change, isn't it, actually? And how we handle change is really important, and how we model it as parents and as teachers. So anyway, we discussed it, and we thought the most important transition actually is the one from primary, which is a very nurturing, wonderful small environment. That's where I was deputy head for many, many years, into a bigger environment that's very exciting, but also rather scary. And we believe that if you make that transition well, if you make it confidently, if you make it positive, if you help a child feel that they're nurtured into a new community, that they belong, then we feel we have hit on something that can really help. And we put families at the centre of this. This is not just teachers preparing children, because they do that all the time. And it's then also involving parents very much, working together, building bridges, not walls, between the whole environment to help children. It's not just about, how to get on a bus and on a train, which no longer doing at the moment anyway. But it's more the emotional support as well, talking around the whole aspects, and it's very comprehensive. We've done loads and loads of videos, checklists and all sorts of things. So it's primary to secondary. It's there for schools because we thought, actually, if we could show schools that we have got it absolutely, the gold standard of this stuff, then they could pass it then on to all their parents, and that takes away a headache, because teachers, I mean, goodness me, at the moment, reading the Twitter feed, because I'm very interested in education still, of course, they are so overwhelmed and they're working so hard, and the government really don't help with all this politicizing about unions and silly business, but really they're focusing on deep cleaning and getting it all ready for the kids. So we also thought, here's our program, if people are interested in it, go and take a look at it. Hope that gives you a comprehensive answer. I'm known for talking too much.
Just noting down where to go and find this, Sue.
Well, it's primary to secondary.co.uk. But anybody interested in joining us, because we're launching it, we're doing it, we've been doing it for 9 months, but now we feel it's really important. Some people can sign up and join, very easily, and we'd love feedback from people. There's the wonderful Jo Fitzgerald. And, there's an activity pack that we created for free for parents and children, not just about transition, about well-being and their mental health, because we're both, it's so important when kids return. It's not about their 7 times table and what have they learned over the summer, or over this lockdown. It's, are they mentally okay? Are they supported and nurtured? Because it's Maslow hierarchy of needs, and then you go on to making sure you plug the gaps, and all teachers are really good at that sort of thing. So yeah, that's the program there.
Fantastic. I was looking through it as a parent and a teacher yesterday, and the videos are so helpful and actually incredibly reassuring. So I would suggest that anyone have a good look at it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
It is a really good resource.
Liz, last you did Transition Ed. Again, fantastic. I was watching the videos yesterday, and I know Emma has made copious notes, haven't you, Emma? Show on your notes.
You're very serious. Nothing is not prepared.
And I found, I've got to be honest and say, when I was watching the videos, I hadn't considered half the things that were discussed, actually, and I've been teaching for many years and I hadn't necessarily considered them. So talk to us about the inspiration behind Transition Ed and exactly what you got out of it and where you're going next with it.
Okay, so I mean, Ellie and I, we only met back in October last year, not even a year yet, when we were at the New Voices conference, both kind of speaking about transition. I'm really fortunate. So my job, I'm actually the transition manager for an LA in the Midlands. So I went from teaching, I primary trained, did primary, and then worked in secondary for 16, 17 years. And then my one geekiness and love is getting it right for the children from year 6 to 7. So I was really fortunate when the job came up. So I work really closely across all of our schools, regardless of academy status. We actually have a buy-in from every one of our schools, which is over 120. So I went down to New Voices to talk about what we do together collaboratively, because at the end of the day, they're all our children, regardless of where they're coming from and going to. And Ellie was talking after me. We met, we hit it off. Ellie kind of said, wonder if we could do something like this on transition. And there it grew. We both got various contacts that we knew. So just kind of what we wanted to do was exactly as you said, Toria. It was kind of think about the things that aren't top of a list when you're thinking about transition, the things that actually they're quick wins for some of these children, but we don't think about them. So just put in different perspectives. And I think we were very careful to try and find people like the fantastic Sue, who would all have a different view and bring a different thing to the table. So yeah, it was. We kind of did a lot of research. We spoke to a lot of people, and just kind of those that we thought had got some fantastic things to say, we begged, borrowed, and kind of asked if they'd join in, and we were really fortunate that they did. So yeah, it was a labour of love.
Oh, it was a fantastic event. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I joined in with most of the talks and the experts, and the things I learned, and the approach to it all, and especially the scientific research behind some of it. It was just so practical as well, and so needed. And at this time, great to be online. It didn't have to be in person. It worked really, really well. So well done.
And
Thank you. I mean, it was. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that transition. It's one of those things that, when it's done well, it looks effortless, doesn't it? But actually, there's so much that has to go on behind it, and it's not. And this, I was in year 6 for donkey's years. Transition doesn't start in June. The whole thing about transition is that long game, and it's about understanding that journey, isn't it? And I think so many people think transition is something that you just do, especially in year 6, post SATs. Oh, right, now we've done SATs. Transition. Actually, everything that builds up to a seamless transition has to happen from day one, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I would even suggest, as working with parents, it's almost like from year 5 right at the end of that, to get them ready. The whole of the independence and the autonomy and the empowerment from home supporting is from sort of then, start to not fuss them, get them to do more things for themselves. All of these things build resilience, build self-esteem, and build confidence. So that's my approach to it as well, because you want the family involved in supporting them. It's not just the school getting them ready, as you say, after SATs.
Well, I was talking to my year 6s the other day, and I said to them, how many of you pack your own bag?
Well, that was interesting.
Shocked at the amount. And actually, it comes back to that whole thing. And I've got a bit of an issue about early years, the fact that many early years children enter not being able to do up their coat, because mum and dad, always do their coat up. It's that sort of thing of do their coat, and so they enter and actually don't know how to do buttons, they don't know how to do it, they don't know all of those basics. Because we live in such a busy society, we tend to do things for our children for speed purposes. You're ready, you're at the door, there's your bag.
Don't get me started. I absolutely agree. I start right back at toddlers about empowering them, because you're robbing them of the opportunity to feel independent. And the toddler years are all about striving for independence. When they have that tantrum about putting on the seatbelt when we used to go in the car, or when, they have to pull on their wellies. I used to teach reception, 35 4-year-olds. You try and get them ready for PE. Oh my God, most of the lesson is changing. But that's where
brilliant. So first lesson, Sue, you'll know rightly, the whole first lesson, they just get changed.
Yes, I know.
And that's all they managed to do. Actually, another lesson, just get them unchanged.
That's it.
Yeah. I know some secondary colleagues in PE that would argue that that's the same thing.
So we need to look at empowering children, not rob. And the word I use deliberately is robbing them of the opportunity to feel competent. I talk about the crucial C's. One of them is to feel connected to your family, to your school, to your community, generally to the world. Capable and competent is another crucial C for me. Don't rob them of that opportunity to struggle just a little bit. Don't leave them there struggling with their zip, but don't just rush in to rescue them either. And that whole ethos throughout your parenting starts to prepare your children then for that transition, which we're here to talk about, not just me banging on about what I talk about. Children need to feel significant and that they count, and they need courage to make mistakes, that it's okay to not know all the answers. Certainly when you go into your secondary school, why would you? And it's, yes, they are all very tall and a lot of them look like adults as you're wandering around, but people are there to support and help you. So for me, all of this idea starts way back and goes right through. It's like a piece of rock. It goes right the way through your parenting, the idea of giving your kids that little incremental amount of independence. So they're not flummoxed, because they get a vote of no confidence. It's almost like you wear a sign that says, I don't think you can cope. I don't think you can do this. And all of the whole big step over into the secondary school is saying, if you get a bit lost or you're not quite sure or you don't know, ask. And no one will judge you. It's okay. So my whole thing is get on with it, empower them.
With regards to asking as well, Sue, I would say that actually they need to be taught how to do that. because we spend such a lot of our time telling children to not talk to strangers and not talk to people you don't know. And just because they're in a school building, they're still a complete stranger to them. So they don't know necessarily how to approach somebody and ask that question. So it's really important that we think right back to, okay, it's easy to say, ask if you get lost, ask if you don't know.
Yes.
But actually, for a child who's quite anxious, even not under normal circumstances necessarily anxious, but you throw them in the mix of this huge school with people they've never met before, including children, so they don't want to look silly. They need to be given the skill. They need to be taught that skill, and they need to be taught how to ask the question. And that actually, that really rumbling in your belly that makes you feel a little bit sick is okay. And once you've asked the question, it will go away.
Oh, that's lovely. Yes.
So it's the little things like that I think are key. And again, starting from year 4 or 5, so that you don't need to do it in year 6. It's commonplace that they're ready
and for me, it's also about listening to them when they start to unload or talk to you about the small stuff. Don't just poo-poo it and go, oh no, you'll be fine. Actually listen to what they're telling you, because often when I'm working with clients and parents and families through transition, or in any circumstance, but particularly this, parents are trying to reassure them and sort of, oh no, it'll be fine, but they're telling you what they're worried about. So don't just undermine it, listen to it, and then again say, well, what do you think we can do to help you with that? Or what can you do for yourself that would help you feel better around whatever they're worried about?
And often it's not the things that you think they're going to be worried about.
Exactly.
They're not necessarily worried about strict teachers or getting lost in the building, because they'll find the PE department with their friends because they're all going there together. It's little things like, what do I do if I need to go to the toilet, or what, where do I put my coat, and having to manage the expectations of multiple adults in a new setting. So that might be, or the fact that they're worried about walking to school by themselves when always they've walked with mum and maybe younger or dad or younger siblings or childminder or whatever. It's like every single aspect of their new experience is new. It's a bit like a new job as an adult. You know yourself when you start a new job, how you worry about everything from how am I going to work the photocopier to where do I park my car to who am I going to eat lunch with. So actually, can I do the job is probably the least of your worries for the first few days. It's actually that's like me it's like me when we did this. I was on early. It's not the content, it's the technology that freaks me out sometimes, but it's the same principle for the kids, isn't it? You're absolutely right. The idea that getting to school could be a real worry to them, we need to hear it, we need to listen to it, and we need to reassure. And the big one is, who do I sit with at lunchtime, because I don't know anybody really,
And the different lunchtimes, I think that's really critical, and that came up actually in transition ed. I forget who was talking about it, but the fact that actually lunchtimes in primary schools are very structured. You eat your lunch either in the classroom usually, or in the dining hall, depending on what you're having, and then you go out and you'll have playtime. In secondary schools, there's a fluidity about it that for a lot of children is very new, very unknown, and they're not quite sure how to manage that time. Who do I go to? Who do I sit with? Where do I go? And I think that's quite frightening for them. If they're not aware that that's going to be the case.
I've done a lot of research with year 7s, and I'm lucky I get to go and see. We've got 19 secondary schools with Key Stage 3 provision where I work, so I'm fortunate I get to go into all of those schools. And collectively, it is always one thing: it's lunchtimes, and they didn't know. Actually, most of the children were like, there was too much choice. I'm used to ordering my food on a Monday morning with my mum and dad on an iPad. And then all of a sudden, I'm faced with 4 different places I can eat. Do I want to go to the sandwiches? Do I want a hot meal? Can I afford the hot meal? Have I got enough money? How am I paying for it? And, one group of students once said they didn't eat for the first week because they were waiting for somebody to ring the bell to say, right, year 7, it's your time to line up, because that's what they'd had at primary school. And it's the little things like that actually we forget is different. When I first started this job, I noticed lots of little things like that, and I wrote a little document called Old Habits Die Hard, and just simple snippets like that of, this is what it's like at primary, this is what it's like at secondary, and everybody can start bridging those gaps, and just as long as the children know it's coming, they can generally cope. But it's that kind of...
What do you say about preparing them for the expectations that start to go up, don't they, around homework and independence and autonomy and stuff? What sort of things do you advise people, Liz, with that?
For a lot of the times, I just get them to get into the habits of doing things. So I do a lot of parent meetings. I'm really fortunate. Again, schools invite me in to talk to parents, and I just do the things that you were talking about, like actually take them on the train a few times, let them do it by themselves. You know, make them. I write a newsletter as well for Sandwell, and one of the activities I got was ask your adult what time tea is going to be at, and get yourself to the table on time. Don't get called, don't get given a warning, just so you can start managing your own time management. And it's little things like that that can be done at home. And then, you know, how many times, I mean, I've got teenage children, I'm forever saying, have you got homework? And reminding them. But actually start doing that a little bit earlier and put timetables together whilst they're at primary. Because again, the language is different. The poets that created an amazing thing for us last week were saying there's over 1,000 new words that these children are going to hear, and timetable's one of them.
And the thing is that primary, adults are the keepers of the time.
Yeah.
The children are like sheep almost. And we find that when we're teaching the concept of time in maths, children very often don't have a concept of time because they are not the keepers of the time. So they don't know how long 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour is, because they're not in control of it. So I really like that idea of actually putting the child in control of the time and saying, right, you need to be here for such a time. I'm not going to herd you into
and that's it, because when they hit secondary, even there may be a bell that tells them that they need to be in lesson now, but they could be the other side of a massive school. It could take 3 or 4 minutes to actually get from where they are at break time to the classroom they need to be in. So they need to manage their time.
I know that happened to my daughter. That was a real shock to her. Actually, and then she got told off, and she hates being told off. But actually, I learned more about transition as a parent, living through it with her and the difficulties she had, than I had as a teacher, because there was silly things. Yes, we had the train learning, and we'd done all of that, but I wasn't aware of, you know, how many things would be different. And I think coming back to that language, listening to those poets and having that discussion around language, I was shocked at how many new words they have to take on board. And the fact that actually that's incredibly overwhelming at such a state of transition as such, that they're having to actually manage that as well. So yeah, I think it is incredibly difficult, and I think it's something that we can't overemphasize.
Do you think as well that it's maybe the fact that primary and secondary don't have enough understanding of each other's practice?
Yeah.
That actually, if you asked a year 6 teacher to really accurately describe exactly what a year 7 day looks like, feels like, the method used in class, the language, the expectations, and then ask the year 7 teachers to accurately describe vice versa. So potentially, because when I trained, I did a weird course where it's 8 to 14. So some of my placements were secondary, some of primary, albeit a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But a big transition project that I did when I was co-head and teaching year 6 was with our high school in getting to understand each other's practice. Right down to sort of when we did English moderation, we moderated year 6 and year 7 work together.
Yeah.
You know, just in terms of expectations, understanding, and we observed each other's teaching as well, so they could see what a year 6 day felt like, and see what a year 7 day looked like. And so I think that's not that idea of the journey. It's not like bang, that's the end of year 6. It's actually this is the next stage.
But it's even more complex than that, isn't it? Because actually, I mean, I've got 2 children that go to 2 different secondary schools, and my daughter has 2, occasionally 3 lessons a day, long lessons, whereas my son has 6.
Oh, wow.
She has to leave her coats and bags in a cloakroom. He has to take his with him all the time. So even, you know, there's even the practice that happens. It's not a generic, this is exactly what it will be when you get to secondary school. It has to be here's roughly what's going to be different. And then people need to work with the individual secondary schools and the primaries to say, right, but this is how ours is very different as well.
I think what you've just said there, Emma, is absolutely fascinating and should be good practice, because most people in secondary just go, well, we'll start again. Now they're back with us in September. And really, there needs to be a really massive bridge of understanding and openness around sharing what happens, what's good practice. So the children feel it less sort of as a complete leap. They can feel it more as a sort of a transition generally, which is smoother. And I think that's a really, really useful idea. I'd love to see that in more schools.
And then
You can come and speak with us, Sue. We have networks, again, free networks for all of our schools.
Wonderful.
Regardless of status.
Yes.
And we have, so we call it a primary English, Maths and Science network group, but we have Key Stage 3 colleagues come along as well. So actually we've got early years right up to Key Stage 3 teachers in the room talking about curriculum, and we'll have days where we bring along examples of work and we look at the difference between year 4 and year 7 and year 8. So you would be more than welcome to tag along to one of those meetings when we eventually.
No, I love that idea. I really do think it's a brilliant idea to be sharing that whole experience. So it's not this big gap and big fear.
Yeah.
It's actually more kind of, working together. And the children would benefit, because also they go to year 7 and you'd think that really the teachers would still like to know, how are you getting on? You're very good at writing stories. How's it going? And they sort of just go, and you don't really see them. And you don't communicate with them because, you can't do that really in Facebook and stuff like that. So again, that sort of feels like you've just lost something rather than just transitioning to gain something.
Or they do come back to see their old year 6 teacher and just tell you all the bad stuff.
Yes, well, you don't want that either, do you?
I'm going to drop a bit of a bomb now. I'm just going to go with it, because we're saying about what they do in the first few weeks at secondary, and the secondary that my year 6s used to go to, the first couple of weeks was testing the kids a lot of the time. It was orientation and transition, but also a lot of testing. And when we started to do the moderation work as well, I think there's a whole issue about, not issue, that's the wrong word, a whole conversation to be had around professional trust as well between primary and secondary.
Yes.
So either trust the data that gets sent up, or have more conversations about moderating judgment so that you're all on the same page and you all agree it.
Yes.
But what we didn't want, what our year 6s were constantly feeding back, was all we're doing is having loads of tests to be put into sets or to be put into streams. Or
heartbreaking, isn't it?
So actually, there's a whole sector-wide conversation about either trust the data or talk to align your practice and your judgments, not kind of thinking, and you get it from infant to junior, you get it from junior to second, so key stage 2 to secondary, and you also get it from preschool to school, where they're coming in with the reports from play school or nursery, and the teachers are going, it doesn't look like this child at all. So actually, transition is also about making sure that the professional conversations are aligned as well as the children's experiences.
Absolutely.
That's my data bomb.
No, I really agree with that. And I remember when I was teaching and children would be coming up to my classroom, yes, I'd have the formal stuff that they'd all write down and stuff. But actually that conversation with my friend, having a coffee around all the children, all the little instances as well, his mum's just had a new baby and they've got divorced, and all of that wonderful stuff that is not just about, the data per se, colours you into knowing the child as well. So they become a person as well. But I think what you've said there, very interesting. I'd like to see better practice with that. Yeah.
I also found, as a parent, I found it shocking that when my daughter started secondary, she did normal tests that she was sort of used to that somewhat resembled the SATs, but she also did these things called CATs that I'd never heard of, she'd never heard of, and therefore she was unprepared for this new type of testing that she was doing, which I found shocking, because not in primary, you never present children with a test for the very first time. You sort of get them used to that style of test. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I found shocking was it was suddenly, you're going to do this type of test, we're going to judge you on something that you've never done before.
Freaky. freak them out. I mean, that whole thing. So going back into school now then, with the transition, with lockdown, how do you see it as different now then? Because circumstances are such that, I'm supporting the idea, for goodness sake, let's not baseline test children way back at the beginning either. Let's get them into school gently and slowly, nurture them, look after them, and then possibly think about that. What are your thoughts around the testing and the whole new process into secondary then through lockdown?
I've written a couple of pieces on these things. I wrote one called "Don't Fall into the Baseline Trap," because actually even the most able child in the world, if they're terrified and haven't been in school since March, actually you're not going to get a true reflection. And I do think that in reality, if you're not getting a true reflection of what they can do, how useful is the information in the first place? So actually, are we wasting a valuable workload?
Because children's lockdown experiences will be very different. Some will have chaotic backgrounds. Yeah. Some will not have had access properly to laptops and e-learning. Others will be, within an inch of their lives doing worksheets. So there will be such a massive difference in their experience. And I think anxiety is one of the big things. And I think it's very important for parents. I've written copiously about how to prepare yourself as a family, as parents, for that moment of when. And you've got to learn to let go as well. This is another key moment in your life, letting them go. I remember with my son, he, dropped him off and he got the bus then, the school bus up to where he was going to school. But I had to realize I didn't hang around on the playground anymore and chinwag and chat to all the parents. I didn't know half the things he was doing. I had to rely on the sort of the app that was telling me what was coming up and what to do. So anxiety around the whole process now, added to COVID, I think is going to be a very interesting time. And, I think we all need to think about that. What can be helped to help them through that transition that's a little bit extra.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I talk to parents about when I'm speaking to parents at the end of year 6. And it's, even if right now you think you're going to be doing the drop off and pick up, actually will come a time when they won't want that. And actually, you are no longer the centre of their world. Their new friend is the centre of their world. So much as you, and I've known parents who might necessarily pick the secondary school they choose because it's en route to their work, so they can do the drop off and pick up. And then all of a sudden, actually, Mum, I don't want to be dropped off. I'm a little bit embarrassed by you now because I'm 14. And I'm not really want to be seen with you. And all of a sudden, they're going to, even that transition can still happen later on in the school. So it's and the lack of contact with teachers as well. I talk to parents about, no longer will you be dropping off and saying, can I just let you know about what happened last night?
Yeah.
And then and the staff also. So the staff won't have the opportunity and don't kind of go, can I just tell you about what happened at lunchtime?
No.
Actually, as a parent, the minute they walk through secondary school, very little about their lives because they won't tell you anything either.
You can imagine how my son felt as I was deputy head of the school, and he came to the end, and I used to kiss him on the head and say, goodbye, have a lovely day. And he just looked at me. At home, we went back. He went, you couldn't do that at home, could you? Not do it in front of all my friends. Oh, yeah, okay, he's growing up. Sorry about that. Double whammy.
Do you think there's I don't want to say danger, but do you think there's a chance that we're potentially colouring the children's potential transition experiences with what we know about transition? Because actually they're all transitioning in this COVID time, which is obviously different for us because we are veterans of transition. They are novices at transition. And actually, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Do you think they might just be okay? Because actually what we're kind of shoveling on is everything that we could have done, should have done, have done this, done that. But actually, they don't know any different.
No.
This is going to be their first. And it's going to be their first of many transitions. But obviously, we know how we would like to do it. But actually, we're going to have to do it this way. So is there a potential danger that we're underestimating just how flexible and adaptable the children are going to be? Because they don't know any better. They're just going to kind of have to get on with it because that's the way it is.
Yeah, and I think the majority will. In reality, most children will just smooth the path themselves almost, especially if you're going with lots of friends, if you're going to a school where you already know people or you've got siblings. But I think it's really sensible to just always go right, or almost like lowest common denominator. Let's, rather than teach to the top in a lesson, actually let's support from the bottom because if a child's going to do okay, they're going to do okay whether you give them some extra things or not.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
We hone our radar as educators, don't we? It's like, assume the bulk will be okay, but actually let's hone. If we've got a reduced amount of contact time during this transition period, actually we need to become really skilled at targeting those children who we think potentially will be the ones that will struggle.
And because we don't always know who are going to struggle, you know, I've done transition for years in a secondary school, and with all the meetings I've had with primary schools, I would say every year there is a member of staff in a primary school that will tell me that Billy will sail through it and be fine, and Betty will have we might need to watch out. And actually it goes completely the other way around. And the children, because we don't know, because we haven't put them in that position before, we just assume sometimes. And that's so actually we don't always put the right support in it, because we're not aware that they'll have issues. It's like behaviour. You get some who are really badly behaved at primary school, but they never put a foot wrong at secondary. And you don't always expect that, because you get the report from the primary. So you kind of have to let them find their own way as well.
Yeah.
You said something at Transition Ed last week that really resonated with me, actually, which is that we need to be very careful with our language, talking to children about transition, so that we are not putting thoughts in their mind, like using phrases like big school. And I thought that was really useful. What should we be watching out for, Sue?
Gosh, I think it's, you know your own child best than anyone in the world, don't you? And teachers also should just be more sensitive to individually each child as they come up, and are they coping? Some children mask their anxiety, of course. You're right. I believe the children take their lead from the parents as well. If you're confident, upbeat, matter of fact about it, ready to support if they wobble a bit, in the first few weeks, most children make a wonderful kind of transition. So I think if you're positive and upbeat, then they will be too. I remember, it's interesting what you said, Liz, about my son made his transition with this, great friend, Christopher Bellringer. What a great name. He went off to a different school than Will. He was head boy at the school before that, confident, lovely boy, sporty, Found it really difficult when I bumped into his mum a few weeks, months later actually, and had a cup of coffee. She said, oh my goodness, he couldn't cope with the transition. He found it hard to make friends. He was an only child. So you never know who's going to do it really well, who's not going to do it well. So I think the thing is not to preempt it, not to think that they're going to all have a difficult time, but just be mindful to look out for if they're not sleeping so well or eating, or they're a little bit anxious on a certain day, night before they go in on a certain day, just to reassure them and listen to them and hold the space for them. That's the main thing for me, to listen to them.
It's like those boys that I spoke to a couple of years ago that hadn't eaten lunch. That always resonates with me. They must have gone home really hungry, and they didn't even realise. They just assumed they'd missed the bell. It wasn't until a friend of theirs said, there isn't a bell, love.
So small things like that can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And some of the changes can be so subtle as well. I was walking my youngest to preschool the other day, and obviously they've got different signing in procedures, thermometers and visors and all sorts of things. And he was holding my hand as he was walking, and as we walked up to the door, I just felt his hand go that little bit. I just held it just that little bit more, and he went in absolutely fine. Absolutely loves his preschool. He'll be gutted this week, because this is his last week this week. But when you just think, that's what you need. That's what I mean about being that sharp focus on actually. To the outsider, he was smiling, he was lovely, everything was fine, but it was just that little tiny squeeze, just as we were, and that slight hesitancy. And you think that's what we need to be mindful of, is the tinier things, the tinier signs in those I'm fine children, actually. Sue said, it's providing that space to have a conversation.
I'm going to throw something in that I haven't really mentioned very often, I suppose, but the reason why I like talking about bullying, is I made the transition to secondary school, and I was put away from all my friends except Angela Graham. Now, these people, if they're listening, I'm so sorry about that, but it is a long time ago. And I got bullied badly. There were some new girls that came in to join the class, and, you know, there was one sort of asserting herself. I wasn't sort of like that. So I actually got alopecia in my first year of secondary school because I didn't know who to turn to. And I remember, this is not a sob story, but it's just come into my head as you were talking. I looked confident, competent, and all the rest. But I remember sort of hiding in a certain part of the playground so that I didn't, you know, you couldn't see me, because I didn't know who the teacher was to sort of say, I'm a bit unhappy. Have you? Because in primary, you notice that sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
You see that child, is she all right? And we've got a buddy system going on here. You sit on the bench, all of that. So that's the sort of thing as well that people need to be a little more mindful of. And then, of course, we started, you know, I never told anybody. And then eventually I told my dad. He found me crying and all the rest, went in to sort it out. But you know, that's the sort of thing. They don't know who to sort of turn to if they're feeling a bit uncomfortable. And not necessarily the teachers are bad, but they're not parading around the playground like they do in primary to keep a little eye on you with the TAs and people.
And that's it, isn't it? That because the adults in the secondary school don't know the children, they don't know those little subtleties that the children are going to have.
Yes.
One of the things we do, again, across all of our schools is we have a little kind of mini project that the children do in the last week or so, or whenever in year 6, that follow them through to year 7. So it's an actual an English, maths and science task that they, if you like, part 1 is in year 6 and part 2 is in year 7, so that they've got that continuity. But the big thing for me is that the first page, it is a kind of about me page, but it's a little bit more subtle than that, if you like. So they've got to about themselves, but in any way, so they can draw, they can write, they can cut and stick things. So that gives you a little bit of a hint about how they are as workers. And then just some information about themselves. It's always from the child. We get lots and lots of information from a primary teacher to a secondary teacher about a child. But actually, we've developed this now, so we get that from the child's voice. What do I like? What do I do out of school? What do I want you to know about me as a person? And they're really helpful, really, really insightful.
Yeah, because I wrote something similar actually for the primary to secondary thing. I call it a journal rather than a workbook, because that sounds a bit, God, that sounds awful. But, you know, I've got this Can Do Kid journal, Confidence, What's Your Confidence Superpower. Again, it's getting kids ready. But from their perspective, it's, you know, what are you good at? What are you grateful for? All of that stuff. And children are not used to particularly saying that. It sounds as if we're arrogant if we say, well, I'm actually really good at this, because we tend to be rather British about that rather than American, which is, that's a bit stereotyped. Sorry about that. But, you know, that idea of, be sort of self-deprecating. But I want children to come with confidence, not an arrogance, about what their strengths are, and say, yeah, I'm not so good at that. But also then their whole personality. Who are they? What do they enjoy doing? What makes them laugh? What makes them, you know, spend lots of time where they don't know when time is passing? What they're really interested in. So it's a holistic approach in my book.
And I think we do lots of it, don't we, in year 7? And we're very, very skilled at asking the children to give us information about themselves so we can get to know them. But actually, in hindsight, that's really hard. In a class full of people you've never met before, somebody wants you to open up about who you are as a person and what you like. And actually, what if what I like, everybody else will find really funny? So the About Me page puts the kind of onus back on the member of staff to create the conversation. Right, I can see we've got 4 people that like gymnastics. You know.
Because it's subtle, isn't it? It's not just a piece of paper. Relationships are built by seeing, like even us on here today. People get to know us, like us, trust us, or listen to us because they kind of take to our personalities or something. So it's the same with children. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I explain to kids that I'm working with as well. Relationships take time. That, you know, it's like step families. When I work with families with that, you can't just put them all in a blender and say, oh yeah, we're a blended family. I say it's more like a slow burning casserole, because it just takes time. So I think the same thing happens with relationships in secondary. It's a slow burning casserole, and that's okay. That's how it should be in real life.
Just to keep the food theme as well, I was on the Books Learning Day, National Teacher Learning Day thing the other day, and I said my challenge is an egg timer challenge. It takes 3 minutes to boil an egg. As a teacher, could you talk about each child in your class for 3 minutes? As in, do you know them? If you really understand the children in your class, could you talk about them, what they like, what they don't like, what their families like, what their attainments like, what their attitudes are like, what they're interested in, who their friends are, who they play with at playtime, if I went outside at lunchtime, where would I most likely find them? You know, can you teach for 3 minutes that egg timer challenge by every single child that you teach?
Wow.
Oh
God, that's a big ask.
That's writing that down.
Ooh, that's a big ask. I like it though.
Yeah, but in primary, I could talk for an hour about each kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And one of the frustrations of the year 6 teacher was when the year 7 teacher would come down and we used to have a brilliant transition teacher who used to come down and she used to remember everything about every member of the family and this, that, and the other, about siblings and this, that, and the other. And then one year I got sent a spreadsheet and said, can you fill this in about your year 6s? And I was like, no. So I went absolutely wild and shook the cat amongst the pigeons, and got a little bit of change happening there. But actually, that should, if you can't talk for 3 minutes about a child that you teach, you're just kind of delivering a curriculum. You're not actually developing a relationship where that child's really going to learn, because you don't know anything about them. You're just lecturing.
Yeah, and I talk to children about needing to do that. I talk to children about needing to do that as well. And I do say in year 6, actually, you could spend a day with 6 different members of staff, and every one of those members of staff will have a different personality. And you might be a really cheeky chappy that the PE teacher thinks is really good and you have a lot of banter, but actually the drama teacher thinks you're being really rude and you get in trouble for it. And you have to, it's that kind of take that step back, and adults need to learn that the children need to learn the differences. It's okay to have different personalities. And the phrase I use is you need to be the appropriate version of yourself.
Love that.
Because I had a maths teacher. If you even spoke in the lesson, you'd be in big trouble. But the geography teacher expected lots of conversation and lots of dialogue between children when they were working. So even they take a long time to get to know.
I think you're absolutely right, Liz. And I think within primary teaching, it's so different because you get to know your children so well. You know exactly. You know when that child is saying something, but it's like I've got one child in my current year 4 class, not my bubble, who is very, very quick. He's got a very, very dry wit. But when you meet him initially, you think, is he being rude? And he's not at all. It's just the way he is. But because I know him so well, actually, I get that. But I can imagine if he's going from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher, and they're not getting to know him, actually, he would be considered rude and therefore would be put into that box of, well, he's like this. And I think it's so important as they go into secondary that children aren't boxed up by teachers that don't fully understand. I'm not saying they do, but don't fully understand and get them.
I think it's really interesting, Liz, what you've said there, because actually we think it's like osmosis. They will pick that up. They'll know that, the PE master thinks I'm funny and this bloke doesn't, or this woman. Actually, we need to...
PE teachers always been the
I don't know. We're stereotyping them now. Never mind.
I went down the drama teacher being harsh, and I was a drama teacher and I wasn't.
I know some very
the opposite.
PE teachers.
But I think what you're saying is, don't presume they'll just kind of cop on to that and get it. Yeah. I think what you're saying is really helpful. Have the conversation and say, talk to them about different relationships with different people, what's appropriate. And I love what you said there. I hadn't really considered to have that conversation, but I think it's a really worthwhile one.
Very much so.
Skill as well, isn't it? Big ask of the children to be that perceptive.
Yes, and sophisticated.
For different people when they've only had to. I'm just thinking it's a bit like the difference between eating your tea at home and then having to go out to a restaurant and like kind of be on your best behaviour. This is the acceptable public version of myself. And this is me at home. Whereas at primary, you're at home, sitting with, eating whatever. And actually, when you go out to secondary, you've got to sit nicely at the table and, behave until such point where you've got that relationship there and you become a regular at that restaurant and everybody knows that's the way that you do everything.
Yeah. The other aspect, actually, that I've worked with families and kids with is sometimes they don't know how to make friends. We presume that they've had loads of friends in primary and they're very popular or whatever, and then they're going to just take that skill straight into a new place and, get on with it. Actually, there are nuances to friendships, and I've written a lot about it on my blog, actually, because there were some simple things with some child. He felt left out a lot. And there was another little girl that, not a little girl, there was another girl that found it difficult. But she was coming into the activity or the stuff they were doing on the playground in the wrong timing. She didn't read the messages from the other girls that, actually, if you wait a minute, you can join in and do this activity that they were doing. Whereas she was rumbling in. Then there's another child who ate really slowly. So by the time he went outside, they'd all set up the football and he could never quite join in. So all these very small things, talk and teaching children is what it's all about for me, at home as well as at school, around friendship issues.
I think that's one of the things I've noticed when I've spoken to children as well. And I'm talking about the children that have moved and they're the only child from their primary school going to the secondary. Yes. And actually, but if they've been in their primary school from nursery, say,
everyone knows them.
They've never had to make a friendship because, you know, at that age, you're just friends with everybody regardless. So you've never needed that skill. You've never actually learned to forge a relationship with somebody because they've just been there all your life. And then all of a sudden you're thrown into the box and everybody says, oh, you'll make new friends, but nobody tells you how to make those friends.
So what do you say to them, I wonder, Liz? What do you tell them?
Well, I try and work with them and I try and kind of say, right, let's get to know me. And it's that kind of idea of how you speak to somebody for the first time and how, like I spoke earlier about, let that kind of rumbling in your belly. Yeah. You know, it's going to happen. So, and it will happen whether you make the new friend or not. So you might as well have a positive reaction from it. And don't let that butterfly put you off.
I was trained by Paul McKenna. I'm an NLP master and practitioner. So I was trained by Paul. And one of the activities we had to do is how do you make friends? And we had a break-off session, right? That's why I suggested it, because I'd never thought about how I make a friend, because I'm quite sociable. I'm very interested in the other person. I'm quite lively. But then I had to unpick what we call my strategy for making a friend, because this young chap, oh, he wasn't young, but anyway, he came up to me and he was really anxious and he was nervous and he was shy and he, you know, all that. And I just said, oh, actually, I ask open-ended questions. I'm interested in the other person's story. I know my story. I know my life. I don't need to bang on about it. So I just and I smile readily. I was known as the smiler at school. And I didn't even know I was that until the teacher, Mrs. Bolger, told me that. But smiling and having sort of open body language and just saying, oh, you know, asking a simple question, how did you get to school today or something, kicks off a conversation. And then sometimes if you are shy, that's perfectly okay to be shy. Just maybe sit back, but ask the question, but look open to sort of wanting to talk with your body language as well.
That's something down the bottom that's just been put on about the fact that friendships are another area where parents are heavily involved at primary and not at secondary. And I think that's really important, because actually parents really help children to navigate those friendships at primary, and then suddenly in secondary they're in with loads of new people and you don't have that parent connection. You know, it's a massive learning curve for a parent, but also for children. So such a valid point being put on there.
It's very much from a parent point of view. It's you even arrange the play dates, don't you? And it's the parents that arrange the social, the outside of school interaction, and then all of a sudden you've got no control over it whatsoever. You know, and lots of our friends.
And there's a different angle sometimes to this. I was asked once by a journalist about sleepovers, and I you know, my kids didn't do them at that very, very young age. They were sort of more older. But there's a whole wealth of, I don't actually know those parents. Whereas when they were in the primary, oh my God, that's fine. Oh, you're going to go and play. But then suddenly you're going to go and stay overnight in a tent in their garden with who? How many boys are going to be there? I said to Molly. Anyway, but all of this to negotiate is difficult, isn't it?
I remember my daughter, well, I need to know the address. I need to know to speak to the parents. I need the mobile phone. Oh God, like, it's be so embarrassing. And it's like, well, I'm not being embarrassing. It's just I can't let you go to a random stranger's house and take over.
Because you do hear, and I'm not just here to scaremonger, but the journalist, why she was asking me is, I think they went there and they were drinking alcohol. They were 14. They were watching movies they shouldn't be watching, and no one was particularly supervising them. Whereas, you know, you have to let them go. And I'm not being a fuddy-duddy, but if you've got different values to that family and you don't know their values, and you're going to give over your kids to them to sleep over the night, I mean, it can be fraught. Not scaremongering, but you just have to think about these things. And of course, the kids won't think about these things, but you're there to be their parent, not their friend. End of rant.
It's a really valid one, and I think it's something, as a parent going into secondary, it was a major learning curve for me, the fact that I didn't have that connection with parents that I had when she was in primary. And there's a level to which you let go, but there's a level at which you have to be having those conversations because they don't think through those things. They just don't. You know, they're so excited about the independence they're getting that they're not considering the danger that goes along with it.
It's interesting about the primary relationships as well, primary parent relationships. My children's school does an app, well, normally, when it's not COVID, does a lovely thing for parents. In the afternoons where the children they go for story time 3 times in the afternoon in foundation, and they have this lovely thing where the current foundation children all walk in and they get a new friend who's going to be one of the new foundation. They walk out hand in hand and then they all go and have story times together. But what the school very cleverly do though, they've got the PTA, or the Friends Association as it's called, and they serve tea and coffee, and they deliberately have it so that the parents get to talk to each other, because they realise if you don't know each other, it's almost like an enforced coffee morning kind of thing. But it was so brilliant, especially with my first, not so much now the second and the third, but with the first one, you're thinking, this is the first time I've gone through this as well. I don't know any of these people. These people are the parents of the children my child's going to be spending umpteen hours with a week. Let's get to know each other. And it was they'd got the existing PTA there to kind of facilitate conversations, but I just thought, what a brilliant way of inducting the parents into the school as well, and saying, look, not only are your children going off with a new friend, but to potentially here are some friends, but here are some new people to get to know. This is your new community that you'll be standing with outside, because especially for parents, when it's your first child going to school, it can feel incredibly emotional and incredibly alien. And if you're not an educator as well and have no input, it's been 20 odd years since you went to school.
And as we know, some parents didn't have a good experience either of school generally, or certainly in their secondary. And they bring their baggage, let's be honest, they bring their preconceptions and they bring their baggage to those moments, and they're not keen to come into the school and all that. So I write a lot about parental engagement as well. I'm fascinated by it and how to bridge those gaps. And you're right. So it becomes a wider community. You don't, of course, your kids don't want you, hanging around all the time when they're 14 and 15, and you may not meet many great friends. But the idea of building a community is a wonderful thing, because that helps everybody adjust to the changes.
I absolutely loved it the first time, and it was so nice to go and kind of have that conversation as a parent to say, I'm really worried about this, or I'm nervous about that, or who have you got? And I remember as well the teacher saying about they were doing the home visits. They come and do a little home visit. And she said, I just want to put everybody's mind at ease. We will not go upstairs. She said, we're not coming around to check your dust. We're coming around to talk with your children. And I remember her saying that. I'm thinking, what a brilliant, brilliant way of kind of just connecting with them. We won't go upstairs. We won't go anywhere else other than the way you tell us. We just want to come and see your kid. And it was that kind of that human side as well, as in we're going to be your child's new person. So
trust us.
Let's get to know you, and let's build up that trust, because it's so important, especially.
Absolutely.
And I think that my youngest is having his induction via Zoom call on Wednesday.
But this is the new normal, so you just embrace it. Because that'll be their new normal as well, won't it? And they're really used to it. So maybe we need to chill out about that and not go, oh, isn't it a shame?
He went to bed with his picture of his new teachers that they'd sent through the post yesterday.
Yes.
He went to bed cuddling his transition booklet, and he went, these are my new teachers, Mummy. I'm going to...
He's not going to thank you about that. Don't let him. He's not going to thank you for telling us that, is he?
He's only 4. He doesn't know. He's fine.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 11. I can help you with that.
And on that note, ladies, we could carry on talking about this all day, but I'm really conscious of the time. And the fact that we've actually managed to fill a whole hour just chatting away. So, Sue, how can people find you, connect with you, and join in all the great things you're doing?
Okay, well, if you're interested in my primary to secondary program, it is primary2 secondary.co.uk. If you're interested in all things parenting, that's thesueatkins.com. I've got parenting club, loads of webinars, you name it, passionate about parenting and supporting you.
Fantastic, thank you. And Liz, what about, how do we follow you? What do we do to connect with you?
You can follow me on the Twitter. My tags there. It's at lstevenson2410. I've also got a blog that I actually updated yesterday. I'd been neglecting it for a while. That's transitionmatters.coach. It's all on my profile. And if you were ever interested in anything that we do as a whole borough, because again, we do engage with over 120 schools, then if you just drop me a DM on Twitter, I'll send you my work email address and we can have a conversation. That's fantastic.
And if people miss Transition Ed, how can they catch up with that?
That's currently pinned to my profile, but it is made public now on YouTube. So you could just search YouTube at Transition Ed 2020. If you have any problems, get in touch with me or Ellie Grout 10, I think she is, and we'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, it's been a fantastic, phenomenal time. Emma, I have absolutely loved hosting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.
Thanks for the invite. Nice to see you, Toria, face to face. We've presented on so many things separately. We've never actually done anything together.
Coming together. Yay. Have you learnt loads, Mark?
I have. It's been really interesting listening into the different conversations and following what's been said in the comments as well. So thank you. That's been such a wonderful morning. So
Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Here's to transition.
Transition.